Lewis Hamilton said 6 words on the radio that may have exposed Ferrari's entire season. "We're at the mercy." And once the Canada data came out, everything suddenly made sense. Because while Hamilton was somehow fighting Max Verstappen for the podium, Ferrari engineers were discovering something terrifying underneath the SF26. The power unit may still be massively weaker than Mercedes. Not slightly weaker. More than 20 horsepower behind. That is enormous in Formula One. That is the difference between attacking confidently and praying the car survives every straight. But here is where the story becomes explosive. Canada was actually Hamilton's best Ferrari weekend yet. He finally looked comfortable, aggressive, natural. For the first time all season, the 7-time world champion looked fully connected to the SF26. At the exact same moment Charles Leclerc was calling the weekend one of the worst experiences of his entire career. Same car, same engine, completely opposite emotional collapse. And now Ferrari faces a terrifying reality nobody inside Maranello wanted to admit publicly. Hamilton may finally be ready to fight for wins with Ferrari, right when the team discovers the engine itself may not be capable of delivering them. And once you understand what Hamilton really meant by, "We're at the mercy," the entire Ferrari project suddenly looks far more unstable than anyone imagined. Subscribe if you love Formula One stories that reveal what teams desperately try to hide. At first, the radio message sounded emotional. A driver frustrated in the middle of a difficult race. But once Ferrari finished analyzing the Canada data, the meaning behind Hamilton's words became much darker. "We're at the mercy." Because Lewis was not talking about traffic. He was not talking about strategy mistakes. He was talking about the power unit itself. And inside Ferrari, that sentence immediately raised alarm bells. Because Canada exposed the one weakness Formula One teams fear most. A problem drivers cannot fix themselves. Horsepower. Now, to understand why Hamilton sounded so tense, you need to understand how brutal Montreal really is for engines. This circuit constantly punishes weak acceleration. Every few seconds, drivers slam the brakes, rotate the car, then immediately demand maximum power again. Over and over. The engine never gets a break. Which means any power deficit becomes painfully obvious during the race. That is exactly what Hamilton was feeling. And for the first time all season, it frustrated him because the rest of the car was finally starting to make sense. That is the irony inside Ferrari right now. The SF26 actually looked more stable in Canada. Hamilton was more comfortable under braking. More natural through corners. More confident attacking late in the race. But every time he reached the straights, the same hidden weakness returned. The Ferrari simply could not accelerate with the same force as Mercedes. Think about trying to fight someone while carrying extra weight tied to your back. You can still compete through skill. But eventually, the physical disadvantage catches up. That was Hamilton's reality in Canada. And this is why his radio message hit Ferrari so hard internally. Because experienced drivers always know when a limitation comes from themselves, and when it comes from the machine. Hamilton knew. The car balance was improving. The power delivery was not. Meanwhile, on the other side of the garage, Charles Leclerc was experiencing the exact same weakness in a completely different way. Unlike Hamilton, Leclerc never found confidence with the SF26 all weekend. And once the engine deficit started trapping him behind slower cars and traffic, the entire race became psychologically exhausting. Because weak straight-line speed creates pressure everywhere else. Drivers brake later trying to recover lost time. Tires overheat faster. Confidence disappears corner by corner. And suddenly, one weakness infects the entire lap. That is what happened to Leclerc. Hamilton adapted around the limitation. Leclerc kept fighting against it. And Ferrari engineers were watching two completely opposite emotional reactions develop in real time. One driver slowly building confidence, the other losing it. That split terrified Ferrari more than the actual result itself. Because elite teams need predictability. They need both drivers understanding the car similarly. Canada exposed the opposite. And then the post-race data made everything even more uncomfortable. According to the concerns emerging from Ferrari after Canada, the power deficit compared to Mercedes may still be around 22 to 25 horsepower. That is massive, especially in modern Formula One, where tiny margins usually decide races. And suddenly, Hamilton's radio no longer sounded emotional. It sounded accurate. Ferrari was genuinely vulnerable on the straights. Vulnerable defending. Vulnerable attacking. Vulnerable every time maximum acceleration mattered. Now the pressure inside Maranello is becoming enormous. Because for months, the biggest fear was whether Hamilton would ever truly adapt to Ferrari. Canada may have finally answered that question. Yes. But now Ferrari faces a far more dangerous problem. What happens if Hamilton fully unlocks the SF26 before Ferrari fixes the engine crisis limiting it? Because if that happens, Ferrari may face the most painful situation possible. A 7-time world champion finally ready to fight for victories, inside a car that still does not have enough power to win consistently. Then the race changed completely. George Russell retired from the lead. Safety car. Instant chaos. And suddenly, Ferrari had a real opportunity to attack. The team reacted immediately. Hamilton into the pits. Fresh hard tires. Aggressive strategy call. For a moment, it looked like Ferrari had perfectly rescued the weekend. Hamilton rejoined close to Verstappen. The tires switched on quickly. The pace suddenly looked alive. And this is where the story becomes fascinating. Because once the fuel loads dropped and the car became lighter, Hamilton started driving the SF26 differently. Calmer. Smoother. More aggressive at exactly the right moments. You could actually hear the confidence growing through the radio. Short answers. Precise communication. No panic. That usually means one thing in Formula One. The driver is finally trusting the car underneath him. And Ferrari engineers immediately noticed it. For the first time all season, Hamilton was no longer just adapting to the SF26. He was beginning to exploit it. That is a massive difference, because surviving a car and attacking with a car are completely different mental states. And suddenly Hamilton looked dangerous. Lap after lap, he started hunting Verstappen down. The gap shrank rapidly. 3 seconds, then 1, then DRS range. And this is where the engine crisis became impossible to ignore. Because every time Hamilton exited a corner close enough to attack properly, the Ferrari still struggled to accelerate with the same violence as the Red Bull and Mercedes-powered cars. Think about trying to chase somebody uphill while they are running downhill. Even if you are equally talented, physics keeps pulling one side backward. That was Hamilton's fight in Canada. And honestly, that may explain why the radio frustration sounded so sharp. Because Hamilton could feel the car becoming better underneath him, while still losing performance in the areas he could not control. Power delivery, straight line acceleration, top speed recovery. The things drivers cannot magically create with talent alone. And this is where Canada revealed something Ferrari did not want the rest of Formula One to fully understand yet. The SF26 may actually have strong mechanical balance, strong corner behavior, strong race management potential. But the engine deficit is forcing the drivers to overcompensate everywhere else. That creates enormous pressure on tires, brakes, energy deployment, even confidence. And while Hamilton slowly adapted to those compromises, Leclerc completely drowned in them. Charles later admitted he never found a single moment where the car truly felt connected underneath him. That is an extraordinary statement. Because drivers at this level rarely lose trust that completely unless the problem feels deeply structural. And inside Ferrari, the emotional contrast between both garages became impossible to hide after the race. Hamilton sounded hopeful. Leclerc sounded defeated. That matters. More than most fans realize. Because Formula One teams naturally move toward whichever side of the garage creates belief. Momentum inside a team is emotional before it becomes technical. Mechanics feel it. Strategists feel it. Engineers absolutely feel it. And Canada may have been the first weekend where Ferrari emotionally shifted toward Hamilton. Not because Leclerc suddenly became slower. Because Hamilton suddenly became comfortable. At the exact same moment Ferrari discovered how serious the power unit problem really is. That timing changes everything. Because now Ferrari faces two completely different races at once. One happening on track. One happening inside the factory. On track, Hamilton is finally learning how to maximize the SF26. Inside Maranello, engineers are desperately trying to understand whether the engine deficit can realistically be solved before the season slips away. And according to the concerns emerging after Canada, the gap to Mercedes may still be over 20 horsepower. That is terrifying in modern Formula One. Because horsepower deficits are not fixed with confidence. Not fixed with setup tweaks. Not fixed with strategy. Eventually, raw performance decides championships. Which is exactly why the FIA recalibration system suddenly became Ferrari's biggest hope. Because if Ferrari receives additional development flexibility later this season, the team may finally get the opportunity to attack the one weakness threatening to destroy everything they are building around Hamilton. And that possibility is starting to make rival teams nervous. Because Canada revealed something extremely important beneath all the frustration and tension. Lewis Hamilton is no longer fighting Ferrari. He is starting to understand how to weaponize it. But Ferrari's biggest problem after Canada may not be the engine itself. It may be the pressure now building around the entire project. Because once a Formula One team publicly realizes it has a power deficit this serious, everything changes internally. Every meeting becomes more tense. Every setup decision feels heavier. Every race weekend starts carrying hidden panic underneath the surface. And right now, Ferrari is trying to manage that pressure while two completely different emotional stories unfold inside the garage. Hamilton is rising. Leclerc is searching for answers. That combination can become explosive very quickly. Because Formula One teams are emotional ecosystems. When one driver starts building momentum, the entire team naturally gravitates toward that energy. Not politically, naturally. And Canada may have been the first weekend where Hamilton truly became the emotional center of Ferrari. You could feel it after the race. The mechanics celebrating the podium. The calmness in Hamilton's interviews. Even Fred Vasseur sounded noticeably more optimistic discussing Lewis afterward. Meanwhile, Leclerc's side of the garage felt completely different. Frustration, confusion, exhaustion. Charles openly admitted he could not understand why the car never entered the correct operating window all weekend. And that sentence matters more than people think. Because when drivers stop understanding why the car behaves badly, confidence disappears much faster. Imagine trying to sprint through a dark room where the floor keeps changing beneath your feet. You stop attacking naturally. You hesitate. That hesitation destroys lap time immediately in Formula One. And now Ferrari faces a dangerous balancing act. They need to keep building around Hamilton's growing confidence, without allowing Leclerc's frustration to spiral deeper. Because if one side of the garage keeps progressing while the other keeps collapsing emotionally, internal tension becomes unavoidable. Especially at Ferrari. A team where pressure already feels heavier than almost anywhere else in motorsport. And the terrifying thing is this. The championship gap is still growing while all of this happens. Mercedes keeps pulling further ahead. The engine deficit remains unresolved. And Ferrari still has not introduced the major upgrades many people expected earlier in the season. That means Canada may only be the beginning of a much larger crisis. Because now every upcoming race becomes a test of two things at the same time. Can Hamilton keep extracting performances beyond the car's limits? And can Ferrari fix the power unit before the momentum disappears completely? That second question is terrifying inside Maranello right now. Because according to the concerns emerging after Canada, the horsepower gap is not something small or temporary. It looks structural. And structural weaknesses in Formula One are dangerous because they infect everything else. Weak acceleration hurts overtaking. Weak overtaking hurts strategy. Bad strategy increases tire stress. Tire stress damages confidence. Everything connects. That is why Hamilton's radio message became so important. We're at the mercy. He was describing a car that no longer fully controls its own races. A car dependent on perfect execution just to stay competitive. And for Ferrari, that realization hurts deeply. Because Canada also revealed something else at the exact same time. Lewis Hamilton may finally be becoming the driver Ferrari dreamed about signing. The overtakes looked natural. The race management looked elite. The confidence under pressure looked real. Even his fight with Verstappen felt like the beginning of something bigger. That is why this situation feels so emotionally complicated. Ferrari finally has signs that Hamilton truly understands the SF26. But the car itself may still be too weak to reward that progress consistently. And now comes the part that should seriously worry the rest of Formula One. The next races may actually suit Ferrari far better than Canada did. Especially Monaco. Less dependence on raw power. More dependence on rhythm and confidence. Exactly the areas where Hamilton suddenly looked transformed. If Ferrari remains competitive there despite the engine weakness, the entire narrative around the SF26 changes instantly. Because then rival teams will start asking a terrifying question. What happens once Ferrari finally fixes the power deficit? And if Hamilton continues adapting at this speed when that moment arrives? Canada may eventually be remembered as the race where Ferrari's season stopped collapsing and started waking up.